Okay, so if there are no questions from yesterday's session, uh, who joined? Okay, if there are no questions from yesterday's session, then today's. So yesterday what we covered was a brief overview of different cloud. Hello, can you guys mute yourself? Yeah, if you're not speaking, just mute yourself. Thank you. Okay. So yesterday we briefly covered different cloud vendors in the market that are available today, and we compared them with Azure, how they fare up. Then we looked at different terminologies within Azure. What is Azure account? What is Azure subscription? What is Azure Active Directory tenant, resource groups, Azure resource model, and a brief overview of different deployment options we have within Azure to deploy resources. Uh, so we will today get started. We will follow up on where we left yesterday, understanding those different deployment options that we have, like PowerShell, CLI, which is Bash, then ARM templates, and SDK. So this session will be split up into two or three, I guess, because it's a 4 hour session that we were planning to get your programming foundation ready for the rest of the courses. Because the rest of the courses, when we go and interact with those resources, we would end up either using PowerShell or CLI or Portal, so that you get experience, also on how do we deploy using different options within Azure. So before we actually go there, so we wanted to set this foundation. So we have this PowerShell, CLI, ARM template. So these are the three core areas where uh, most of the enterprises use to deploy their resources in Azure. So it is very rare that you would see people going and using this Azure portal to deploy resources, because you would like to automate those things as much as possible, so that you can build your CI/CD pipelines. So that's how the DevOps process works today. So we will look into PowerShell. Okay, so what is PowerShell? Uh, so PowerShell is one of the utilities that has been long available within Windows. So this is a shell utility, just like a command line prompt, but it is much more powerful than command line, and much more easy to use than command line. What it does is basically it allows you to automate tasks related to Windows administration. Like uh, starting a service or stopping a service or killing a process or starting a new process altogether. Any administrative things that you perform on Windows servers. So mostly today enterprises use PowerShell to do that stuff. For example, if you want to create a new certificate or import or export a certificate, so that's pretty easy if you use PowerShell. It's basically shell scripting language. It is. So it started in Windows. It is built on top of .NET. So if you know .NET, then the PowerShell is built on top of .NET only. So that gives you very powerful abilities in terms of what you can do and what you cannot do with PowerShell. So there are two versions of PowerShell you would see normally on your Windows today. So if I just type PowerShell, right? So there are two things available: Windows PowerShell and Windows PowerShell ISC. So this is an interactive shell where you can just go, just like command prompt. You go and type your commands, and you will see the output. But you can do scripting also using Windows PowerShell ISC. It is just like a development environment. So you have Visual Studio today, which is like an IDE for creating .NET applications. Similarly, you have Windows PowerShell ISE, which is like a scripting in IDE for creating PowerShell scripts. So ISE means integrated scripting environment. So that's the short form from ISE. So if I open this, you will see it's similar to command prompt only. So you go and type any command, for example, get service. Okay, so let me just restart hyphen service. Okay, I typed it wrong down. Get command, it is get command on start. Okay, so how it works is fundamentally you just type a command here, just like command prompt, give some parameters, and you'll get the required output. So there are few things which are drastically different than what you see in the command prompt today. So I just typed a simple command here. So I don't know the list of commands, for example, within PowerShell. So you can use this commandlet get underscore get hyphen command to know different commands which are available within PowerShell. Uh, we will understand what this noun parameter is and how this command pattern works within PowerShell. So this is Windows PowerShell. So the difference between Windows PowerShell and Windows PowerShell ISE is if I open now PowerShell ISE, you will notice it immediately. It's okay. Uh, so this is the Windows PowerShell ISE. So what you get is a scripting environment. Here you can write your PowerShell script. So this is the main window where you go and write your PowerShell script. You can use to discover different modules and different commands within those modules using this pane here. And it also provides the command. If you want, you can type the command directly itself and execute it. So this is kind of a development environment for your PowerShell scripting. So this is okay. So let's so if I type command here, the same command get underscore command. So it has IntelliSense as well. See, so it's easier if you don't know PowerShell. Then it's easier to get started on Windows PowerShell ISE to learn PowerShell rather than use the interactive shell here. So get command then says so it automatically populates different parameters which are available for this particular command. So I used a noun and then star service. Now if I press enter, it won't run. Of course, this is similar to Notepad wherein you just type anything and nothing would happen unless you go and execute it. So if I select this, then only this command will execute. If I have, let's say, 10 commands, only this command gets executed. Or if I just press F5, all the commands in that script will get executed. So if I press F5, this is how. So we'll see the output here. So that is ISE and this interactive shell. These are the two options which are available today. And if you're dealing with Microsoft, so we are trying to learn this under the context of Microsoft Azure Cloud Platform, right? So Cloud Platform also in the web browser itself, we can do the scripting. We have this option available, the interactive shell experience within the Azure portal itself. So if you go to portal here, so if you go here, there is something called as Cloud Shell. If you just hover over it, right, it says Cloud Shell. Cloud Shell is an interactive shell experience that is provided by Azure portal, and you can launch that within this browser itself. So if I click on it, Okay, you will see similar experience. See, the Cloud Shell spinning up, the same experience that you see here in Windows PowerShell. Now, the advantage of this is since you are already logged into your portal.azure.com, so this shell is having a context of your subscription, what subscriptions you have, and you are, since you're already logged in, so it knows about you. So it's see authenticating to Azure. So you are already authenticated to Azure. Whereas if I try to use the same commands, what I type here under this context, it won't work because this shell environment doesn't know anything about my Microsoft Azure subscriptions. So I have to specifically type in the command here to log into Azure, and then it will pop up a window where I need to provide my credentials, and then it would come to know about my Azure subscription and all the different Azure resources that I've created. So that's the advantage of using Cloud Shell. You don't need to set up your environment to get started. So again, if I type the same, I cannot type the same command as such. So this is related to the Windows, the get service, but I can let us type some command to understand different uh, commands which are available within Azure. So get command. So this is to get the list of commands, and noun. Let me type AZ, or let me type resource group. Okay. So the same command, see, it works here. Only thing is, instead of if I would have typed service, which is more or less will not return the same. It is a different. So the Windows related commandlets will not be available here. That is obvious, right? So these are all related to service that we have. So when I say services, hopefully you have seen this services.msc. You are aware of this, right? You guys, services.msc.
Yes.
So these are all commandlets related to that. So if I go to services.msc, it is asking for some admin. Yes. So this is the all different services which are running on your system. So that's why you see the command output is different here aspect because this will return all the commands which are available within Azure. There are so many things, but this would return the commands which are available on your Windows desktop related to service. Uh, so that's Cloud Shell. Now the advantage of Cloud Shell is you can also do scripting in Linux Bash shell. So if you just switch to Bash, it will try to authenticate using that Bash shell to my Azure account. Okay, so these two options are available, PowerShell and this. The one distinct advantage of using PowerShell is if you have seen Windows command prompt, the output or any shell scripting output, basically it gives you the output is in form of simple text or strings, whereas any all the outputs that you get out of PowerShell command when you run them is in object based. Now, what is the advantage of having the output in an object based? So if you have output in an object based format, it is easy to pipe it to different other commands. So normally, how would we use commands, right? So it would always be interrelated. So for example, here I can use can use command like get service. Now get service would normally give me the service object that I'm trying to get. So if I go back to this, let's say if I want to get service, I want to restart the sprint puller, print spooler. There is something called print spooler also here. Okay, so I want to restart this service. So first you have to get this service. Once you have that service object with you, then you can do all the different operations on top of it. Like you can start the service, you can stop the service, you can restart it. So all these operations. So what happens is you are using the second command in context of the first command. So first command, whatever output it gives, you will take that output as an input for your second command. Because the first command, what would give you the is the service object itself, and use that service object, and then you can use that as a parameter in a start service. So which service you wanted to start. So you give that as a parameter and it will start that service. So the object-based output helps you, doing. So if I type here, let's say start get service. Let's look at it. Get service. Uh, so let's use this. This is much more easier, right? So let's use this. Get service. Name of the service is, let's see, print spooler. And then we can do something like pipe it. So pipe it means pass that output to another commandlet, and it will use that as an input and execute that command. So this is called as, passing the output from one object, from one command to another object. That is called as piping within PowerShell. So you get service this, and then you can use something called as stop service. Let's see if this works. So if I want to execute only this command, I'll select that line and then run selection effect. So see, it actually worked. If you see from the output, so there is an error, that is all fine, but it was able to get this service print spooler, and it was trying to stop that service. So in stop service, if you see, I didn't give any parameter saying that what service I want to stop. So whatever is the output that this command that gave, that was piped to this command, and it used that to run that command. So service print spooler cannot be stopped due to the following: cannot open spooler service on computer. That is fine. But you see the now if I type vis-a-vis, if I only type, let's say, stop service, okay, without using that command line, what would happen? It is asking for that input object. See, so unless I give that object, it won't run. So that's the advantage of. So these are fundamentals you need to understand. This is across all PowerShell. You will see this is the same behavior. This is the basics of PowerShell. If you understand these basics, it will be easier for you to fast track your, understanding how PowerShell works and how you can quickly grasp PowerShell commandlets as well. Okay, so that is object based. Then let me just control C here, command out of it. PowerShell is also extensible. Now this becomes very natural, right? PowerShell is extensible because it is built on top of .NET. You can build your own PowerShell modules, and you can extend that PowerShell. You can build your own PowerShell module using .NET. If you know .NET programming language, let's say tomorrow you are not able to find any commandlet that you require. So you can go and create that commandlet. So there would be some templates available. You use that template and you follow the best practices that PowerShell team suggests, and then you can create your own commandlets. And you can add that to the modules here. So let's say you wanted some commandlets for file operations. So although they are available, but certain file operations might not be available, you can very well go and add that my custom file operations as a module here, and then you can import that module and start using your own commandlets. So it's extensible. Uh, then it uses verb and noun names to reduce command memorization. So see, a lot of commands that you see in command prompt today, it's not standard way of naming them. So it becomes very difficult to memorize them. But here in PowerShell, it is pretty straightforward. So all the commands that you see, at least the inbuilt commands that PowerShell team itself provides, those are very straightforward. So how the command name is structured is you would have something called as verb, and followed by hyphen and the noun. So verb is the action, that you want to take on that object. So this is any object that you want to perform operations upon, and what kind of operation you want to perform is defined by the verb here. So you don't have to, memorize all the commands. So if you know this basic understanding how the command namings are done within PowerShell, it is pretty much easy to discover different commands and remember them. So for example, if I want, so this is related to service, right? So services. So if you are putting get here, that means you want to get that object, service object, and you put start here, that means you want to start that service. So you don't have to remember, you just need to remember, let's say, service, that's all. So this is the command that I need to use within PowerShell to deal with services on the Windows. So get service becomes natural, start service, stop service. So we looked at that command, right? So if I use this and run this, see, restart service, resume service, set service, start service, stop service, suspend service. These are all becomes natural to uh, you know uh, get the commands once you know how these commands are structured. So similarly for process as well, right? So when I say process, your task manager, you go and then see those list of processes, right? So let's try and get commands related to that. If I don't know any command, let's type this get command, and the noun is that part only. So when I type noun, I want to get all commands for that particular service or object area. For example, here it is service. So all the commands related to that services will give it to me. Noun means this part of, when I say noun, this service is a noun here and get is a verb. So all the commands related to this noun, give it to me. So I'll say noun, and let's talk about process. Now let's say process. So like if I run this, so it will again give me all the commands related to process here. Get process, start process, stop process. Very similar to this, right? There is no difference here. Here it was service, here it is process. So, so it is very easy to get started on PowerShell and pick up it, uh, fast track it, fast track your learning on it once you understand these basics. Uh, so that is noun and verb, and then we have PowerShell gallery. Now, what is PowerShell gallery? If you have used NuGet packages in your development, .NET development, or any development for that matter, it is similar to that only. So PowerShell has its own gallery where you can import some commandlets. It is like a marketplace where anyone can go and publish their PowerShell related commands that they have custom built themselves. So that would be available here in the PowerShell gallery, and you can import those commandlets in your PowerShell script to use those commands. I hope you understand when I say NuGet package, right? So anyone who is not familiar with NuGet packages or this concept of marketplace. Okay, I hope you understand that part then. So let me try. Yeah, so if you go here, so you can install different commands. So install module would be there. Then which module you want to. So I don't have a module related to Azure on my system. So I want to use. So if I, let's say if I want to use this commandlet, so it won't work. Let me give you first-hand experience itself. Let's say we looked at different commands related to resource group, right? So let me just get command noun star resource group. Oh, I'm in the Windows PowerShell. So see, I'm not getting any command related to Azure resource group here. But if I go here, this is in the batch. Let me switch back to PowerShell. get command now start resource group. No, I am getting this list of commands. So that is because the module Azure module is already pre-installed in this shell environment, but it is not on my system in my this Windows PowerShell environment here. So I don't see any command related to that. So I need to install that module to use those commands. So to install that module, you have this command called install module, and then you type in which module you want to install. So for example, I want to install name anything like Azure. So Azure RM or AZ. So it's called as AZ. Where it is? Azure RM is also okay. Let me just try running this effect. Okay, I need administrative rights are required to install modules. I've not opened this in admin mode. So basically, this is the option this is the command you run. If you run this command, Azure modules would be installed. And then you can start using, these commands. So when you run this command again in your PowerShell, Windows PowerShell, you will get this list of commands. So that's PowerShell. So that's a brief introduction of PowerShell. So when I run this install module, what happens is it will install from the PowerShell gallery. So PowerShell gallery is hosted on the internet somewhere at some endpoint by the Microsoft team. So it will reach to that endpoint and download those PowerShell modules on your system. And then it will import those modules into this session, PowerShell session. And then those commands would be available for you. So that's how it works. The Azure is one such module, but if you are interested in different modules, you can install them like just like this and get started on this. So that is PowerShell Gallery. So Azure PowerShell module that we already looked into it. So if you are in here, right? If you are in here, you are already logged in, so you don't need to do login. So, but I'll just give you an experience how this works. If you are, let's assume that you are on Windows PowerShell here, and then you have to connect to Azure. So how would you do that? So there's a command called connect AZ account. When you run this, this is the experience within shell, but ideally in Windows PowerShell, a Windows pop-up with a browser would open, and you will be redirected to like this. You don't have to enter code here. It's trying to, you'll be okay. Then it will present to you the login page, so you can log in with your account. So I'm already signed in, so it will just pick up this, and it says I am now logged in, signed into Microsoft Azure PowerShell application. You can close this window. Yeah, let me close this. Okay. So that's how you sign in. You just, provide your credentials, and when you come back to your PowerShell, it would show you the default subscription that would be. So it is showing me the default subscription. If you see, once I logged in, this is my default subscription. So any commandlet that I use now, Azure commandlet, the resources, if I don't explicitly specify subscription, then this is the subscription under which my resources will be created. So that's a brief overview of PowerShell. Uh, let's look at CLI. So that's one way of creating, resources within PowerShell. So let me actually give you one more here. So we can create resource like AZ. What is that? Yeah, create new resource. So new AZ resource group. So this is the command for creating a new resource group within Azure within Azure. So it takes parameter as name. Let's give it as PowerShell itself. So, and then location. So we looked at, right, these are the different parameters yesterday when we created resource group within Azure portal. We provided three parameters in fact: the name, location, and the subscription. Now subscription is defaulted because okay, I'm creating this in Windows PowerShell, it won't work. Let me put it here. New resource group. Sorry, AZ resource group. Name PowerShell and location. Location was East US. Let's see. So it got created. See, now if you go and look at our resource groups here, PowerShell should be there. Sometimes it takes to control refresh. Yeah, yeah. Sometimes it takes it from the cache. So that's why we were not able to see it. Now I did the hard refresh, so I could see the resource group PowerShell. See if you go into this and see at properties, PowerShell East to West region, it created our resource group. So this is how you can create resources using PowerShell. Okay, so now let's look at CLI. So CLI is again the same experience. It's a shell scripting language, but it is a bash shell, which is used in Linux environments, Linux operating systems. So like for Windows, you have PowerShell. For Linux, you have CLI, bash shell. That is called as Azure CLI. So the only thing that differs is you can very well go and create all the Azure resources using this, but the commands and how the naming of those commands are different for bash. So if you know bash, if you know Linux shell, then you can use that understanding here as well. So let's so I don't have Linux over here, so what I'll do is I'll try to switch to so what okay, that's good that we are here. So this becomes tedious, right, to scroll up and down, since we don't have full shell experience, full window here. So what we can do is there is something called as, how do I minimize this? Here, I can open the same shell experience using this URL shell dot azure.com. You can go to this site and it will open the same shell for you. Here you just need to sign in, because now this doesn't know anything about the context about my Azure subscription. So if I need to sign in here, so let me close that here, and then which directory I want to go to technical. Okay, so see same experience here, but this is like a full window experience for you. So it becomes easier. Okay, so now you are, so if you have anytime logged into the Linux, you will see the same here. So basically it's the username at the machine name. So here there is no machine, it is the Azure. So you see Vishwanath at Azure here. So I can start typing in commands here. So for Azure, all the command starts with AZ. That's how it works. So you will see the drastic difference. The big difference you would see is in PowerShell, it is easy to understand the command from the command name itself, because those are very descriptive commands. I mean, full names, not short forms. But uh, if you come to shell, right, bash shell, it's the opposite of it. It is all short forms. You will see it. So AZ is for Azure. Then you can, if you're since I already logged in, so you can use AZ login to log into the Azure subscription. But since we are already logged in, so we can go and create resource group here. So AZ, now how it works is, actually let me give you a reference link here. So if you go here to this link, it will give you all the commands that you can use for interacting with Azure. So AZ account, so manage your subscriptions. So we want to create, let's say, resource group. So go to search for resource group. So here you'll get the command here, AZ group. So let's use that here, AZ group. This is the command to create resource group. So AZ group and create. So this is like totally reverse. So what you do in PowerShell is you would say the verb. So this is like an action that you're going to take, right, on this resource. In PowerShell, you would specify that upfront. Create the group, for example, create hyphen group. But here it is, after you specify, this is like at higher level, which resource you want to create. You specify that resource first, and then you specify the action. So that's how the bash commands works here for Azure. So AZ group create, and then you provide the parameters for creating that resource group. So what are the, so if you don't know the help, you can type help here. So I think there are double hyphens here, you need to type. Okay, then it will give out the help on this. So what are the parameters required? Location, name. These are the two parameters we want to give. So you can use an alias as well. So hyphen else as short form instead of providing this big hyphen location. Uh, Similarly for name, you can provide slash n. So let's use that. So these are two required commands to create our resource group here. So if I type az group hyphen create hyphen l, then location would be East US, name would be, let's give out PowerShell uh, bash, then enter. Okay, so this created the PowerShell bash resource group in our Azure subscription now. If you see the provisioning state is succeeded, that means we can go and take a look at it now itself. And what kind of resource it created, resource group. So if we go back to our here the experience, let me close this, let me try refresh, it won't appear. Okay, I need to do hard refresh. Let me do that hard refresh. Okay, so in under which subscription did it create it? It is under FC67. And which subscription I am in right now. If I go to here, and so I am in different subscriptions, so I need to switch the subscriptions. Okay, I'm so here I'm in a different directory. So what happened is it created, since I logged in with my outlook.com and I selected the default directory was not the one that I am logged into portal here now. So it is WAM trial, whereas the subscription that I'm looking for is under a different directory. So if I go to switch directory, and okay, this is the directory that I used in the Cloud Shell. Okay, so this is where you see the PowerShell bash got created. If I go here, FC67, this is the subscription under which it created. So PowerShell bash. So this is the CLI for you guys. Okay, it's very simple. So the list of commands, if you just familiarize yourself with the few of the commands, it becomes very natural to know the other commands. For example, AZ group is to create for resource group. Similarly, for other resources that you want to create, like virtual machine, so login, specify to log into Azure, log out of Azure, AZ monitor, AZ network, can create networks here, and the parameter list is also almost common across. So you location is a common parameter that we need to give for each resource. So you can use hyphen L there. So whatever common parameters, the name and L would remain still the same. That's a pretty much standard here in the um CLI as well, the bash shell. Okay, so this is a brief overview of CLI. So and PowerShell, how we can use both of these options to deploy our Azure resources. Now let's look at the third option, Azure SDKs. No, this is a favorite tool for developers, So, and this is mostly used by the DevOps or the operations guy to automate because these are easier to understand. So, if you are already from development background, you know .NET, Java, Python, all this. So, Azure SDKs is a standard set of libraries which are provided by different Azure product teams to use those experience of language that you already have and use these SDKs to create Azure resources, to provision Azure resources, just like we do it using PowerShell CLI. You can use that. So you can write .NET program and use these SDKs and create those resources. And it supports today many popular languages like .NET by default it is there, PHP, Python, Java. So you can there is an SDK available for each of these languages and for almost all the Azure services or products that you see in portal today. So you can use this library. So you can use NuGet. So if you know NuGet, you just you import that NuGet package and then you can get started on that. Uh, So yeah, so this is like creating infrastructure. So what we are seeing is like creating infrastructure using code, right? So this is what so you can write applications to provision all different resources within your Azure subscription, and then deploy your Azure resources on top of those so deploy your application on top of those Azure resources. So this link is there where you can download different SDKs for your IDEs. So if you are a .NET guy and you use Visual Studio, then you can install Unified SDKs. Now, Unified SDKs, there are different versions of SDKs. Unified SDKs, wherein you get all the SDKs for different Azure resources, right? If you are dealing with virtual machines, if you're dealing with networks, or SQL database, all those SDKs will be available here in one single package. So you don't have to install different SDKs for let's say if you're working with only virtual machines. And tomorrow, if you need SDKs for SQL database, then again you need to import those NuGet packages. So that is like a combined experience here, unified into single package. Unified SDKs. So here, if you install Visual Studio 29 today, uh, then by default, if you go with the default options of different packages that uh, you want as part of Visual Studio 2019, then you will have this, unified SDKs installed as part of it itself. You don't have to separately install this SDKs into Visual Studio 2019. Uh, Similarly, if you want Azure PowerShell command-led tools, you can install Azure PowerShell from here. Okay, and then Azure CLI interface. So I showed you Azure CLI in the browser, right? But if you want to install on your local system as well, you can do that using this option. These are the different Azure Cloud Shell options. So okay, so that is unified SDK. So if I wanted to give you certain experience, like if I go, let me give you Visual Studio installer. So if you have 2019, you go to Visual Studio installer. It's asking for. Okay, so I can Visual Studio Enterprise more modify. So here, if you see when you install Visual Studio 2019, you'll get this option for the first time. So you can, select the packages that you want to install. So by default, you have lot of options here available, but you don't want to install everything because then it takes time to load Visual Studio and run them if you install everything. But if you go here, so if you choose this Azure development as an option, you will get this Azure SDKs. So you don't have to separately install. When you're installing Visual Studio itself 2019, you select this option and you see all the development environment for that Azure will be set up on your Visual Studio. So .NET Core, .NET from Azure development prerequisites, everything will be installed here as part of this package. So this is one way of once you have installed, you can get started on that, creating applications which interact with Azure. So any questions so far? All good?
Yeah, good, good.
Okay. So either I'm explaining too well that you're unable to understand, or I'm not making any sense. If you're able to follow it, nice. Let's okay. So last piece of it. So three options we saw today: PowerShell, CLI, SDK. There are still couple of more options. uh, so let's look at this. ARM templates. This is again very favorite tool for DevOps guys to use this option to deploy Azure resources because this is very simple. If you don't know PowerShell, if you don't know CLI, that is still okay. If you don't know development languages, that is still okay. But if you know file formats like JSON and you know how to write a JSON file, that's all you need to deploy resources, to automating, deploying resources in Azure. So ARM templates is a way to declare, is a declarative language, basically declarative syntax it uses to say what you want to, which objects in Azure you want to deploy. It's like you type the name of the object like resource group and provide the parameters, location, and this in a JSON format, and it will go and deploy those resources within Azure. That's all you need. So we will take an example of this, look how this template looks like. So what it provides you is infrastructure as a code. This is all infrastructure. So as a code, right? So you don't have to. This is similar to Azure SDK also. So the advantage of this is if you write a code, then you can maintain a version of it. You can maintain source control over top of it. So when I say source control, let's say today you wrote a code to deploy virtual machines only. So tomorrow your application gets a bit upgraded and you need few more Azure resources like storage, for example. So you create another version of that source code and you add, libraries or, command code related to deploying Azure storage accounts. So this way you can maintain source controls for your infrastructure as a code files. The advantage. Similarly for ARM templates as well. So if it's a simple file, right? JSON file. Nothing. There is no libraries, nothing here. Like you have it in SDKs, you need to have those SDK libraries, NuGet packages. You need to know different methods which are available, different classes which are available to use. There is nothing like here. You just need to know certain objects, how they are named, and then simple text file you create within a notepad, you can create the entire JSON file and use that, pass that JSON file to a command, or you submit that in Azure portal and it will go and create the resources for you. That is as simple as you can get in Azure portal to create resources. So you can apply source control, all these dev. So since you are applying source control and this is a code, so it supports rapid agile development. And so mostly if you see CI/CD pipeline that gets built today, uh, it will use ARM templates to deploy your Azure resources. And it is idempotent. You need to understand what is idempotent. Does anyone know what is idempotent? Hello? Anyone knows idempotent? What is idempotent? Rakesh, Srinu, Hali, any idea on this? It's not related to Azure, by
No,
the
I don't
way.
have any idea.
Okay. So idempotent is like, so so with respect to Azure, this is a file, right? It's a file. If you submit that file, it will create, for the first time, it will create that Azure resource. Okay. The next time you go and submit that file again, what would happen? Because the resource is already created there, right? So would it go and create another resource, or would it fail out? Because if you try to create the same resource with the same name, everything, it will conflict, right? And it will fail. So idempotent basically means that it doesn't matter how many times you go and deploy that file, it will give you the exact same, the provisioning experience. It will give you the same set of resources would be provisions, and if it is already there, it won't go and provision. If there are any changes to that, it will make those changes to those resources. So no matter how many times you go and deploy that, it will give you the exact same state within your Azure provisioning. So Azure provisioning state will remain the same. So that's the idempotent basically. So you don't have to worry about those things. Okay, what if so next time I go and run that file, ARM template file, what would happen? Because I already created those resources. So I need to change the names to create new resources and all that stuff? No. So if you want those resources to be deployed, you run them again and again. Doesn't matter. The Azure will automatically handle that. So that is idempotent. You can. Okay, so another advantage is let's say if you want to deploy 1,000 virtual machines. Okay, so ideally if you go via PowerShell or you go via CLI, you will iterate on this. You will have some for loops where you'll go create first resource, then you'll go and create another resource. After the first resource gets created, then you will go and create another virtual machine. But here in ARM template, if it is possible, it will go and run those provisioning for 1,000 virtual machines in parallel. So if it takes like 5 minutes to create a virtual machine today, it would still take 5 minutes to create 1,000 virtual machines, because behind the scenes, all 1,000 virtual machines are getting created in parallel. So if possible, only. In certain cases, it is not, because certain resources needs to be created first. Only then you can create the other resource. For example, in when we created a virtual machine yesterday, we had to create public IP, the disk, and the networks first. Only then, once these three resources are created, you can go and create a virtual machine, because for creating virtual machine, these three are dependencies. So in that case, also, right, you need to make sure that you order the um, resources in a way that you first create the public IP, and that so the ordering becomes important within ARM templates. So if you tell uh, okay, to create virtual machine without getting IP and network created, it won't work. But that is not the case. Ideally, that is again taken care automatically by ARM template. You cannot, the ARM template is designed in such a way that If a resource needs to be created and there is any dependency for that resource to be created, you have to specify that within that resource itself. Okay, this resource depends on this resource. So if you describe that in ARM templates, then Azure is smart enough to understand. Okay, this resource is depending on this resource, so I'll go and create those resources first, and then create the original resource. So that orchestration part is also taken care by uh, Azure for you. So let's take a look at how ARM templates structure looks like. So if I go here, so by default, when you create any resource in Azure portal, there is an ARM template associated with it. You can go and export that template. You don't have to create it from scratch. So for example, let me open one like Active Directory resource. So I have few resources created here like virtual machine, the disk, and the network interface. So if I go to export template under settings, export template, this is an ARM template. If I go here, let me minimize this. Let me also minimize this. Okay, so this is the ARM template for the JSON file, uh, how it looks like. So you have certain structure here. The schema is a high level parameter, which is normally same for all templates. The only thing it specifies is what is the schema of this JSON. So right now we are using Azure uses this version of the schema. Uh, so content version that you can specify. So this is like versioning your JSON files. So let's say this is your first version of the JSON file. Tomorrow, if you want to change this file, you can specify the version here. Let's say 1.0.0.1. This is up to you. So what all parameters does this JSON deployment template take? So for example, these are all the parameters that you would ideally supply when you are creating a resource in Azure portal. Like for virtual machines, what are the parameters you gave, the name, the location, the resource group under which you want to create. So those becomes all parameters. So those are structured here. Now this is not an intuitive way of editing a JSON. So let me actually copy this and put it in a Visual Studio so that it becomes easier to understand the structure. So let me launch Visual Studio. I have Visual Studio Code as well, I guess. Code, yeah. So within Visual Studio Code, also you can get connected to your Azure subscription, and you can browse ARM templates from here. So let me go to, so this is under this subscription. This is C2 MPN. Okay, Enterprise MPN right here. So virtual machines here. So it will give me the ARM template, a similar thing. Okay, we were looking at here, I guess, for the entire. Okay. So this is pretty much okay. So this is not giving me the entire. This is giving me for individual. Better is to copy it. File, new file. Okay. So this is parameters. So different parameters that you see, like for storage account name, storage account key. This is for the storage account. Ideally, you would see this name of the virtual machine. Then the location, virtual networks location. So high level, this is the schema content version parameters, and then you have the variables. If you are using any variables, so this is the same concept that if you have done any programming anytime. So whatever variables you use, whatever is the understanding of the variables within that development environment, this is the same understanding here. So if you create any variables, you can reuse that variable in different sections within this JSON template. So there are no variables here for this template. Resources. Now this is the core part of it where you say, let me minimize this. Okay, where you define which all Azure resources you want to create. So here, the type of resource you want to create. This is a network interface. Then you see virtual machine here. So for virtual machines, what is the API version? So why API version, you may ask. So if you see the how these resources get provisioned, we talked about this in yesterday's session. There is an REST API that gets called, and that REST API is nothing but the ARM API. ARM API forwards that REST request to the resource provider, and the resource provider is the one which will go and create your Azure resources. So here the resource provider is Microsoft.compute virtual machines. So this is the resource provider which will take that ARM request, API request, and then it will provision the virtual machine for you. So these are all APIs. So APIs has a versioning. So that is why you see API version here. So this is the latest version. Then the name of that virtual machine. So this is taken from the parameters. So this parameter is defined here. Okay, so this is how it is structured. Then the properties of those, like what is the size of that virtual machine, standard D4VS. So this is how you define the resources here, just a JSON template. You just need to understand the structure of it. Once you understand the high level structure, then it becomes easier to create this JSON template. And moreover, you don't have to, because if you provision that in Azure portal, by default, you can export that template and then start editing this template rather than creating the structure altogether from the start. Okay, so then you have different extensions, simple template here. And we talked about depends on, right? So this extension, so before you go and actually install any extensions on your virtual machines, you need to have that virtual machine up and running. So this is how you say, okay, before you go and create this resource in the Azure, make sure that this resource is created, virtual machine is created. So this, it depends on virtual machine. So this is how you specify the dependencies. Okay, very simple template. So this is again one way of uh, deploying Azure resources, ARM template. Now, if you have these ARM templates, you can go and store it here itself. So if I have certain templates, you can save those templates here in the Azure itself. Like I have few templates here to deploy VPN gateway, for example. To deploy Azure Media Services, I have this template. So I just go here, click on this, and I can say deploy. If I click on deploy, it will go and create that resource using this template. Okay, so that's all, and it is extensible. You can add PowerShell or Bash script. So if there is something that you are not able to, if you want complex logic to while deploying your resources, then you can add PowerShell and Bash script as well. That's extensible. You can export the ARM template that we have already looked at, and you can author your ARM template using Visual Studio or code. So that's the ARM templates. Any questions on this? We are good. So, so that's the end of.
Uh, Excuse me, Vishwanath sir.
Yeah, Rakesh.
Rakesh,
Yeah, Rakesh.
do you have any separate tutorial for ARM templates, like how to create those?
Yes. So if you see, right, our this session is for 4 hours. So I was just
Okay.
giving you overview of different options here. We will have
Okay.
understanding ARM template. We just took an overview of what ARM template is, what is over the structure of it. But actually, we'll go and design one ARM template from the scratch.
Okay.
Okay, that will get you will get more understanding. Similarly, we'll do for PowerShell, for CLI as well. So in this session, I just wanted to give you an overview of these options, but we will go
Okay.
to certain basic level, try some creating some scripts,
Okay.
and deploy resources. I'll also show you how we do that using Azure SDK in the Visual Studio.
Okay.
Okay, so overview part, you understood, right, how these technologies work.
Yeah.
Okay, so let me
Understood.
actually give you one more tip here. Behind the scenes, what is happening? Does Microsoft Azure maintain all these different ways of creating Azure resources? I mean they have to maintain in a different places, right? If they create tomorrow a new service comes up, right? So what would happen? I can create using portal. I can Let me type that portal, that resource. I can create that using PowerShell. We talked about. Uh, okay, I can create that using CLI, that is Bash. Let me write Bash here. I can create that using ARM template. I can create that using Azure SDKs. Okay, there are so many options. I can actually create that using REST API as well. So many options to deploy your Azure resources. So, do actually Microsoft Azure maintain all these different options to create, or how does it work? So let me give you one tip here. So at the end, what it boils down to, whenever you submit any command in PowerShell or in Bash or the JSON template itself, right? Uh,
Okay.
or SDK for that matter. Behind the scenes, at the very end, what gets generated is a REST API with all those parameters. What it is basically, it is, you give the resource and the parameter. What are you doing essentially is you are giving what resources to create, what Azure resources to create. See, this is fundamental. If you understand this, you'll understand the core of it. What Azure resources you are creating. What you are doing is you are just specifying this. Okay, and what are the parameters for creating those resources, right? So in Azure portal, what did we do? In the portal, we just went into creating there is a UI which will give you an option to create different parameters to create that resource. Let's say virtual resource group. You give name, location, and you tell, okay, resource group is the resource that I want to create. So you have that UI option. This is essentially what you're doing. Those are the two things. That's all. Whether it is PowerShell, Bash, or ARM, or Azure SDK, or Portal, or REST API. So what it boils down to is basically a REST API. So at the end, what would happen is HTTPS, Azure.com slash subscriptions, whatever it is. So management API is there, which will say create resource. For example, I'm just making up some URL here. This won't be the actual URL, but there is a API which is available. So create resource under which subscriptions you want to create. Let's say ABCD. Then resource group I want to create, under which resource group. So this is the API. So say ABCD. Then you will have some parameters. That parameters could be specified in the body as a JSON. Okay, I want to
Okay.
create this resource group like that. Okay, this is what it boils down to at the end of the day. No matter what you submit at the higher level, this is for your use. If you know PowerShell, this is for your there's a PowerShell commandlet. If you know Bash, there is a Bash commandlet. So from whichever background you come, you have these options available for you to create to write that infrastructure as a code. If you're familiar with this, but at the end, what all beneath these layers of these higher layers, it will call this REST API. All of this will call REST API at the end, and it will, this is how. At the end, this REST API is nothing but your ARM APIs. These ARM APIs get called,
Yes.
and then ARM APIs will give it to the resource providers, individual. So if it's virtual machine, it will give that particular piece of code to the virtual machine resource provider, and that will go and create the virtual machine for you. So that is the deployment mechanism. So leaders need to maintain this REST API and then just provide the commandlets on top of it for different scripting environments or languages. So that's the okay. So if no questions, the access also, right? So if you have created your free account, we can go through that hands-on. So I will suggest you go and create those resources, at least resource group and virtual machine if you can.
Okay.
Okay, and try creating it using PowerShell and CLI. At least create
Okay.
resource group. So that is pretty simple. Pretty simple. You can create storage account as well. So the commandlets will be available here. So I've already put the link for CLI, I guess, here. I'll also specify the link for PowerShell commandlets where you can get the list of all PowerShell for here. And you don't
Okay.
have to use Windows PowerShell. You can very well go and here, inside the PowerShell only you can launch this Cloud Shell. That way you understand Cloud Shell as well. Okay, for the first time, if you click on this Cloud Shell, right, it will ask you to create a storage account. So just click on that button, create storage account, and then it will start this shell for you. Okay, so do that as an exercise, and tomorrow we'll dig deeper into all of this. That's it.
Okay.
Okay, then. So that's all I have. We can end this. Okay, stop it now. Wait.